Boom! What's up, everyone? Welcome to Simulation. I'm your host, Alan Sakyan. Very excited to be talking about all things trauma, all things development, all things authenticity. We have Francesca Maximé joining us. Hello.
Hello. Nice to see you, Alan. Such a pleasure.
Thank you for coming on to the show.
Yeah, it's great.
Really appreciate your work a lot. Really grateful that Ron made the connection happen and made it all come together. This is a really important conversation for those that don't know Francesca's background. She is a certified mindfulness meditation teacher. She's also trauma informed, and she is also a poet, an author, a journalist. She is the host of the WiseGirl video podcast, which is awesome. You can check that out in the link below. And just after looking at your work and understanding more about your passion for helping people, I have fallen deeply in love with what you do, so I'm very excited to be talking about this. So let's start off with kind of a big history perspective on civilization. It's kind of what we love doing to start things off.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
A little civilization.
So here we are. We're stewards of Earth after a long period of evolution, and we're figuring out how to work together with exponential technology, with a big population boom. It's like a little bit of like the roll of the dice is kind of like where you're born in the world, and then that's the stimuli you take in. That can be trauma, that can be radical wealth, it can be radical poverty. So tell us about kind of your current synthesis on all of that.
I mean, I think what you say is, subject. A lot of people have different ideas about how do we come into the world, why do we come into the world, when we come into the world, and all of that. My personal take on it is pretty much rooted in ancient wisdom, traditions and insights that I think have been borne out over time in my own direct experience, that have sort of been, talked about by others also from their own direct experience, is that we're all subject to causes and conditions. So there's going to be stuff that's influenced how you came into this world, how you get imprinted when you are brought into this world, and then how you move forward as you are adulting in this world. And that there are factors there that are more in our control than others at different points in time. And that a lot of times people think about, especially here in Western philosophy, sort of this meritocracy, or pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or if you work hard, you'll be able to achieve what it is that you want and need. And for some people, that very much is true. Other people don't start with the same kinds of opportunities, and so it wouldn't be true. And then there's the piece about, well, even if you have sort of opportunities that you see on paper, if you don't have awareness, you don't have choice. And so what we find is that a lot of folks who actually appear to have a lot of choice and seem to be theoretically living lives that are sort of really free or open or interconnected or filled with possibility, don't really have full awareness of how they're constituted neurobiologically, physiologically, evolutionarily, neuroscientifically, and all the ways in which their imprinting and their awareness and the narratives and the stories that they've come to believe about themselves influence how it is that they go about comporting themselves day after day. And it can kind of narrow the vision, kind of narrow the field of what you even see. And so the whole point of being more aware, opening ourselves up to curiosity, what don't I know? What else is possible here? What else could be going on? Who else is influencing me, or has, or whatever, from any realm, if you're talking about civilization and universes or constellations and whatever. Can I be curious about that and then see what wants to emerge? Or have I already named something, come up with a preconceived notion on what it is, and hence limited my options from the very beginning? And I think a lot of people do that. We've talked about sheeple. We've talked about sort of moving along with the pack, and there's certainly a little bit of pragmatism. I'm not saying we all should just live in this world of non-duality. We're all just one, and the cosmos are, I mean, that's true at a certain level, and it's also true that we live in these bodies, and we walk around, and here in San Francisco, there's homeless folks on the street that are struggling, and you know, there's you and me sitting here having a nice cup of coffee and a conversation, and there's a lot of reasons why we're here and they're there, and what do we want to do about that?
Yeah, you hinted at these really crucial points. One of them is this opportunity. So throughout history, we've seen that the more that we present people with an opportunity for them to pursue what they find most meaningful or fulfilling in their lives, the more that person kind of realizes their fullest potential in the world. So kind of making a baseline of these basic needs being met across the planet for humans is super crucial. This other thing you pointed out is the awareness. So the awareness that one has to develop through their life, and also have a social fabric that helps them understand that they can be what they want as that most meaningful person, most meaningful goal, most fulfilling person that they can strive to become, is that, you know, this communal awareness that we have to have. I like those two a lot. So this is, you know, you point out like the instance that we have here where a lot of what happens in terms of like resource distributions, we can kind of see like the Pareto principle applied to like almost everything. And what we see is a very large concentration of wealth in the hands of a very small amount of people, and tremendous non-wealth accumulation in a vast majority of people. And that's kind of just like the monopoly effect of how things Pareto principle out. And it's not really exactly clear on how to help with the realigning of our values and structures to redistribute / empower / figure out what to do there, while simultaneously, like we were articulating earlier, figuring out how to eradicate the things like traumas that can sometimes birth people into a circumstance where they can't actually fulfill their fullest potential. So how can we address that?
Again, I mean, I you know, most of the stuff that I'm sharing is not necessarily new, but I'll share it because I think it's valuable. And that is that, you know, greed. I mean, scale, maximization. How wise is that? Meaning that, you know, there's a lot of things that we do that we don't even question, right? Because we're operating out of a framework where maximization of profit or scale or taking things, I mean, we hear about this all the time, and that's good for the bottom line, and that's a framework. One can look at that as a framework, but it's kind of rooted in more for me is less for you, because there's only so many resources, you know. And if we look at what's behind the need, I mean, you know, if you look at the work of Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, or even like Gabor Mate, who's the addiction specialist that, you know, I know that you admire his work, as do I. What's the need? What's behind the need? Why do we always want more? You know, why are we so insatiable? We're either none of that, can't have any of that, or I want more, give me more, you know, Britney Spears song. Why? Does it have to be that way? Can we get curious about what it is that we're always wanting more of? So my point about this is just that it's if we can be sort of those who are in white skin privileged positions, those who are in socioeconomic positions, those who are in able-bodied positions, those who are given a certain amount of privilege, either intellectually, academically, having a platform, whether it's the opportunity to share something like this, to recognize that that is in fact a platform and an opportunity, and to then get curious about not only one's own limitations or traumas or whatever it is, and sort of bring a friendly attention to that, as opposed to I wish I weren't this way, I can't stand this, I never want to look at this again, I hate my family, I haven't talked to them in 20 years, I'm better off without them, I haven't talked to, you know, my ex or whatever it is. Yes, all of that may be true. I'm not saying we have to revisit everything in order to drag it through the mud. But the more that we understand our constitution, our neurophysiology, and our biology, then we can bring that into awareness. Then we can be in a place of choice. Then we can be in less of a place of reactivity. Then we can hold our seat, and we can learn how to respond more wisely to the challenges in the world, including economic inequality or including poverty, and act from a place of wisdom and not just from intellect. Wisdom is embodied. Wisdom is collective. It's not just individual. And we don't open up, I don't think, anymore to this collective wisdom that very much is here, that we forget about because we have been sort of programmed with the idea that we have to do it all alone. And that's counterintuitive to the way that mammals just are. And we are, of course, Homo sapiens sapiens, the ones who are aware that we're aware when we actually are able to get out of our lower brain structures and our limbic brain and move forward up into our prefrontal cortex, right? But we can't just always have executive functioning with our left brain. We got to be willing to kind of dip into what the right brain and our embodiment has to teach us. And that is something that the more we get comfortable with how to do that, because we're not trained to do that. That's not a skill set that we grow up with. We learn ABCs and we learn multiplication tables, but we don't learn relational skills, and we don't learn skills about relating to ourselves.
Yeah, that's a major skill set that is looking like we're going to be integrating back into childhood development. It seems like it was lost over the last couple hundred years, and now it's being reintegrated, this heart-centric thinking, this unity thinking, the social emotional intelligence, empathy, eye contact, immersing oneself in the perspective of another, all of that. And this like collective learning you talk about as well is that there's these 100 billion people that lived and died before us to build civilization that we're not even grateful for so many of the things that they made ubiquitous to make our lives so easy. So then it's the wisdom that's embodied in us through this transgenerational building of civilization that we have to realize that we can't just syringe off the top all of this financial success, just syringe it away from thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of humans, just so that we can purchase a fifth car or a fifth house or a fifth boat or whatever, that these materialistic rings and necklaces and they don't mean anything compared to the life of another human that is starving or that has creative potential that is not being unleashed into the world.
Well, the thing is, as long as we see someone as separate from us, we'll always feel as though, well, it's okay if I have this or they don't. But if we see us as a larger family, then it changes the whole terms of the debate. I mean, the age-old question is cui bono, who benefits? But if we see as though we have skin in the game, I mean, we have the Super Bowl coming up, right? We have skin in the game. This is our collective. We think we live in a bubble because we have certain privileges, so we have theoretically more choice, but not really. We're all sort of in the soup together. And so the more that we kind of have a collective lens, see, usually people of color or people who are marginalized see things from more of a collective lens. People who come from positions of privilege, the lens through which they're looking at things tends to be more individual. And that in and of itself sets up a framework that then comes up with a certain way of thinking or kind of thinking. So when you broaden the lens, which is sort of the work of mindfulness, which is sort of why these trauma, sort of somatic therapies and approaches and integration can be so helpful, is you're dropping in to the totality of your own experience, physically right here now in the present moment. We're recognizing the relational field, for example, here between you and me. Ron's here, he's off camera, but he's over there. He's with us also in the room. All of our ancestors are in the room. All of yours from Mount Ararat, all of mine from Italy and from Haiti and from Africa before that, and Spain and the Dominican Republic before that. And are these not partially all within us embodied? And to what extent have we even been in touch with any of that? To what extent do we just wake up in the morning, brush our teeth, go to the bathroom, figure out what we're going to have for breakfast, and then go about our day? And that's why sati it means cultivation. Mindfulness is the remembering. Remembering meaning if I'm dismembered, I'm fragmented. Trauma is trauma healing is the reintegration. Mindfulness is the reintegration. To become from whole, H-O-L-E, separate, to integrated, back together. And when we start to do that work with ourselves, and we have the courage to do that, and we find ways to do that that are safe, that are titrated, that aren't just like falling off the waterfall into the, whatever, then we start to actually feel like, wow, I'm in my body. I can be here. I can move about in the world. I'm not just like sort of trying to hide from the world or have these preconceived notions. I can stay more open and curious about what else is out there, what else is possible. Everybody loves a good brainstorming session, right?
You're hinting at this, and we're going to transition here because this is perfect timing for it. This notion of dosing or of titrating one's expansion of awareness through being more radically whole themselves through the transgenerational wisdoms and being able to tap more into that and understanding the collective, more unity thinking, that it we don't just push a child into a swimming pool that's 6 feet deep and go good luck. You know, you take a child and you hold them while they practice swimming, and that's the notion of developmental psychology. You develop one's faculties of awareness. And so when it comes to things like better understanding one's radical wholeness as well as the transgenerational, where we're going, okay, let's explore this. Let's explore
We're like
this.
putting that one down, putting that one down, putting that one down. They're all on the menu. Okay.
I just want to say that my father threw me into Lake Winnipesaukee to teach me how to swim back a long time ago. So.
And Ron, you're still here.
Yeah,
you survived.
I did.
Your organism made it.
Yeah.
Lake Winnipesaukee and all.
So there may be potentially even different ways for teaching styles. For maybe there is some where you dose a lot in some way right away, you dose very, very little. One of the examples is when you have a tremendous amount of fear or anxiety towards something like public speaking. Right now there's a lot of kids, Douglas Rushkoff was just on the show, he's been teaching 5 years, and he's like, more and more kids are coming to my class with like, here's my excuse, I can't publicly speak, here's my excuse, I can't do group work, but I'm here to learn and stuff. Well, okay, well, you got to build up your immune system a little bit. So what is it about the thing that you're most fearful of public speaking or of doing group work? And how can we maybe, if you can't look at someone's eyes, maybe we can start by just looking for a little bit. And then maybe we look and then ask a question. And then we maybe,
well, that's even behavioral. I would go back further. I would say, what is the need? What is it needing? How is this serving you? Why is it helpful? Why is this thought or behavior? First of all, it's a thought. I can't do public speaking. It's not actually true. I mean, it may be what you think or maybe what you're believing, but it's a thought. So number one, that's a thought. You know, just like they say, feelings are real and emotions, they're real, but feelings aren't facts, in the sense that they're very real to you and they are real, but they're not like the only reality, right? And so at the time when I'm dealing with a breakup and my heart is broken, of course I'm feeling so devastated. Of course, when I'm about to have to go on stage to do a presentation and I can't breathe, I'm having a panic attack or something like that, and I'm freaked out, of course that's like real, that's an embodied and somatic thing. Okay, so before that happens, before we start working on behavioral stuff or anything like that, what are you believing? How did that come to be? What are you noticing when you sit there and you think about, I need to do group work or appellate? Usually, and I say this very generally, it goes back to some kind of shame, some kind of embarrassment. What that means is you're going to be ousted from the tribe. That means you're not going to get food. That means you're not going to survive. That means you're going to die. Okay, so if I do this, it's to stay safe. So if you look at Dr. Stephen Porges, polyvagal theory, all of this stuff, mostly people do stuff that they think is going to help them stay safe. But a lot of people walk around thinking that the rope is a snake, even still now. And they don't know how to reset the nervous system to a place where they see it for what it really is, which is the whole point, is clarity, right? You want to say, oh my God, it's a snake. I don't want to step on that. You don't want to step on everything. You don't want to get bitten by the cobra. But that's wisdom. That's discernment. That's very different from just having some blanket thing of, I need to stay safe, so I'm not even going to try to have a relationship because my heart's been broken. Let's get curious about what's underneath it. How did you first learn? I mean, if you go to attachment theory with John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, there's a ton of people out there now that are talking about this. Do you have secure attachment, which is, you know, object constancy means I know you're going to be there even when I leave and come back, and I'm going to be able to sort of still check in with you, and you're going to accept me, and we're going to hang out together? Or did you have someone who was there, but they weren't really there? They weren't connected from that heart space. And what are the learnings that you had internally about that? A lot of people who auto-regulate, a lot of people who are very, what they would call dismissive or avoidant attachment, didn't have that kind of engagement from their early caregivers. If you have people who had unpredictable caregivers, they kind of come in, they give you some love, then they sort of say, well, if you don't do it this way, we don't like you so much. So what do you learn? You learn to always go all in, and you're trying to anticipate everything. You're trying to prevent something bad from happening, right? And so you learn that it's all on you, that you have to fix everything, that the other person can't come in and actually take their part and do their part. So group work would also be very intimidating to someone because they wouldn't feel. So then they might go back to just staying safe at their little silo and saying, I can't do this, right? And then there's sometimes a combination called disorganized attachment. So the point is all of this trauma resolution, mindfulness, and I don't mean mindfulness when you're checking out and you're doing what they call, John Wellwood just passed away, like spiritual bypassing, where you're just sort of this stoic, you know, like wooden thing. It's all about learning how to relate to life and all of its vagaries coming from a place of keeping your seat. And that is where these kids could then say, all right, I'm willing to engage in this because I'm recognizing that this is a thought and I could practice what it would mean and what am I really believing about what's at stake if I were to go here and make a boo-boo. And I do this with my clients all the time. There was a client who had a 5th grade thing where she had a little project go a little sideways, and she was like threatened by one of the little classmates when, actually not 5th grade, 5 years old. And she was carrying this into her 20-something, you know, year-old life on Wall Street. And we did this sort of exercise, and it goes away.
You have this quote that you write, and then that others I believe have said as well, just about trauma being inevitable, but it affecting us for our entire life is totally a choice, that we have the choice to be able to reprogram our habits and our thought patterns.
If you have the awareness, you have the choice.
If you have the awareness, and if you have the teachers around you that can help you, hold you up in the pool while you figure out how to swim. And all of us need some sort of like holding up, because we're such imperfect beings, but we're also simultaneously perfect. I want to touch this. This is super important. It is the development of the child into the world. So the research is now starting to become more clear, and I'm sure that civilizational wisdom about this was clear in the past, and then we kind of got lost. It's a common thread is this wisdom that's been lost at times. But there's a 2-month period from when the child is born. It's like the maternal-infant relationship. That's so precious and so delicate, the child being born out of the womb and into the mother's hands, and the father as well, and them being there to help for the first 2 months of development, just have the most nurturing, loving, unconditional love relationship, because any sort of lack in strong childhood development in those first 2 months has a significant effect in their neuronal and synaptic sculpting, which causes a tremendous long-term ailments.
Yeah, Bruce Perry talked about that, and when I interviewed him a few weeks ago, and anybody wants to watch that, it's a good interview actually.
Great interview.
He's great, but he talks about 2 months, 4 months, but early. And his basic point is that through, again, he's a child psychiatrist, neuroscientist, researcher, works with all kinds of children who've been traumatized, but that in his model is called the neurosequential model, talking about dosing. But his point is that kids that have secure attachment early on, meaning unconditional love, their needs are met, whatever it is that they're needing or wanting in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like food, clothing, and shelter, but also that relational piece of being molded into with the mother's, or the father's chest, or the grandparent's chest, yes, or whomever it is, that kids who have that early on do better in life, even if their life circumstances shift, meaning that they enter into poverty or they have, you know, hardship in some other kind of way, than kids who don't have that, are born into wealth and have, you know, a roof over their head, gilded, literally a silver spoon, but don't have that relational piece and don't have that kind of attention. And then they end up with the things like I was saying before, like potentially, you know, avoidant attachment or an overemphasis on autoregulation. And then that can turn into a real dismissive quality later in life. Like, I didn't need anyone, nobody was there for me, I'm not going to, you know, give to anyone else. And so you could be rich, but you could not have, you could have a poverty of an ability. And then that is, again, to cite Perry's research, and his next book was on empathy, that can be part of the seed of what takes away our ability to have empathy, which is the foundation of compassion, which is not only to feel with. Empathy is that I actually can literally like feel what you're feeling. Nobody wants to get stuck there, you get burnt out. Compassion is holding your seat with the capacity to feel with, having the wisdom and discernment to figure out what's wise to do or not do as we go, either on a case by case or on a more global level.
Oh my goodness. I want this to be better understood. There's 7.7 billion people now, and they all were birthed into different life circumstances, and that it's so much of our ability to get behind the eyes of what it is like to be born to complete basic needs met versus complete basic needs not met is a huge change in our life trajectory. And so when we can get behind the eyes, we can understand that this is where our humanity lies, is being able to make these humane, loving, compassionate, empathetic connections between other humans. Okay, now let's go, you know, that's, you know, this roll of the dice, you're born and you do, sometimes basic needs are met, sometimes they're not, and sometimes you get the love, sometimes you don't. Now you get to deal with a myriad of these circumstances in your work. And how do you best, because obviously everyone has their own mental lattice that's developed, but also you have to kind of like, you do this process of kind of like poking and prodding. How else do you learn about them? You have to like ask questions.
I ask them to sense into their own body.
And then you learn from them sensing into their own body. So teach us about this style of, we obviously do something similar here where we like ask people about what they care about, why it's very important, etc.
Put your feet on the floor.
Okay, yeah, get that grounding.
And just notice. We're not checking out, we're not going anywhere. Just notice what it's like to actually feel your feet right now on the floor. Heels, balls of your feet. Just feel that contact and feel the support. Just notice how your body is sort of seated in the chair and what it's like to feel the contact of the skin and the back of your thighs in your jeans on the chair. And just be aware of that there's support there also. And in your lower back, in your mid-back, your buttocks. Yeah, nice swallow. You're smiling, which is lovely, but not necessary. But again, just noticing.
It's just interesting thinking about the gratitude one can have for just the support of earth, the support of the chair.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's nothing that you need to be doing right now, nowhere to go, nothing to do. No one to be, not even TV host. And just notice if anything's shifting inside. If there's an image, sensation, any part of the body that maybe feels a little bit more tingly or constricted. Maybe has a color to it. And maybe not. But just bringing a friendly attention and a little curiosity to what's here. What are you noticing?
More relaxed.
How do you know you're more relaxed?
Just, you can tell by your physiological state, I was way more in host mode, and yeah, and now I'm just, feels more like the parasympathetic nervous system's kicked in. I'm just more relaxed. And these, so now walk us through, you know, that was a practice that
very small.
Very small.
But you picked up on the piece about it of it's possible to be supported, and the noticing is the key, often missing element, that actually right now, right here, I'm actually being supported, and there's actually right here, right now in my existence and in yours, kind of like more okay than not okay. Yeah, there's problems, yeah, there's issues, yeah, there's whatever. But in the wider scheme of things, right, compared to maybe the way things have been for us, maybe the way things are for others, can we just be noticing what actually is here right now? We're not creating anything, we're not inventing anything. And the awareness around it can begin to sort of decalcify a little bit habit patterns, because where we turn our attention is what grows.
Yeah.
So when we open up to possibility of not just being here, host mode, gotta do host mode, you know, like, right?
Yeah.
And we all have to perform, right?
Yeah,
Whether you're a Wall Street banker, whether you're a TV host, whether you're a journalist, whatever it is that you are in life, a physician, we always have to do certain things. I'm not saying we are just open and gooey 24/7, right? Because that's not practical, that's not wise. But we're learning how to shift.
Yeah.
So when we bring our awareness into the fray, we become more able to know what to do and what not to do, and when. And it's not always just some ubiquitous circumstance where we always do it this way.
Oh, I love the being able to turn one's attention towards things like just the support of the earth and the chair. Another good one that I really like turning the attention to is just the gratitude for each inhalation. We get to be alive through these inhalations. Another one is that we get to be alive through these heartbeats. That it's just, you know, there was a couple moments when I was tuning inward when I just really was able to tune into how grateful I am for that heartbeat that's happening inside of my body. And so when, again, so there's like kind of this, you know, this, you get to function with the role that you are as your character in this game, in the story that you're playing. And then at the same time, you have like a gooey, lovey, unity, gratitude essence that also comes in and kind of interplays and ebbs and flows together. But we live in such a heavily intellectual society that sometimes it can be difficult to wrap in the gooey, lovey spirit into things.
Well, because there's really a fear around trusting it. You know? What would it mean to trust that? I mean, what would it mean to really trust that there's something deep within you and deep within others that is whole, that is connected? What would it be to trust that even on those stormy days, the sun is still there, but it's just obscured by the clouds right now?
Yeah. It's one of my favorite analogies. It's such a good
Well,
one.
it's an easy one.
The sun's always shining. It's always bright and shining.
But the thing is again, realizing what it is that we are believing or thinking and how we came to believe or think that sets us up for sort of a default mode network, they call it. If you talk to Dan Siegel and you go to the midline, and that's why if you do narrative stuff, you're using the corpus callosum and you're integrating, you know, into what you would call a cohesive narrative. So this is all the business of making sense out of your life, understanding not just what happened to me, but how did I get here, but who am I really? And not just who am I really, but what is this about? And there really is no answer. It is just sort of a mystery. Like, I mean, even Ron was saying over there earlier, like, everything is so uncertain. And I'm like, but what's certain is that it's uncertain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. We are certain about our uncertainty.
So can we be curious and stay open to what's here in this moment and then the next moment?
Yes. There's another aspect to this that I think is important to address. You walked us through an exploration of being really connected to the present, being really connected to gratitude, and so much more right there. And you're dynamically adjusting to how the people you're working with, their states. Mm-hmm. So teach us about how you're figuring out what their states are, how you're helping them work through some of the potential traumas that they've had in the past, how you're helping them integrate those. Teach us about this.
Well, I think anyone, I think, who experiences regular life, you walk around, you'll see that different people have different compartments, right? Some people are, you know, they're just more like this all the time, right? Some people are like this. Some people are like this. Some people are like this, right? And some people are like this. And if I were standing up, you would see it more physiologically with like your, you know, the spine and a lot of it goes back to like, what are you operating out of? Fight, flight, freeze, attach or submit. Are you using these, you know, sort of sensory motor psychotherapy language around these early experiences that tend to shape how we end up showing up in the world? You'll see some, especially, I won't name names, but there are certain men that, you know, you always see them photographed like this. Mm. Interesting. So when you start noticing that, like I'll have a client that, you know, when we started working together about a year ago, they would come into the office and they were just always, you know, like kind of like this, mm-hmm. you know, like they're mm-hmm. kind of like this. We did a ton of boundary work. What would it mean if you said this? What would it mean if you approached me this way? What would it mean? I can't do that. Really? I can't say that. Really? Like, can we be curious about what about that feels scary or why? Oh, really? What does that remind you of? Oh, really? So yes. Wow. If I had that experience when I was 6 or 7, you better believe I wouldn't be saying X or Y or Z. I would have learned how to just be in my room doing my homework also. But that carries forward when it's not looked at. So by doing these relational pieces of, what would it be like right here, right now, if you said, I really don't want to go to the park with you today. I don't know if I can say that. What would it mean if you tried? Just right here, we can imagine it. You could say it in whatever language you want, it doesn't really matter. It could be like more complicated language, less complicated language. And the person might just say, I don't really want to go to the park. Beautiful. Just notice what happens in your body as you say that. I don't want to go to the park. And then usually something will shift. I feel a little more spacious. I feel a little more whatever. Great, just notice that. Hang out there for a minute. Because the body hasn't yet had the experience of getting what it wants and needs, So the only experience it has is this contracted state. So it only knows how to stay safe from what was very adaptive at one time, which is now limiting. I won't use the word maladaptive, but now keeping them from having the fuller life that they want, or being able to show up fully in their marriages or their relationships, or being able to engage at work in a way that they feel is respectful and getting the kind of attention and recognition that they need. So when we practice together, what are you believing? What are you feeling? And then sensing into the body and starting to teach the body, like, hey, is it okay here right now to say this to me? What would it be like to ask for what you needed or wanted right here, right now? I mean, this will show up even in sex with women and orgasms. They won't even say what they need or want. Why not? What's the repercussion? What's the belief? Is there potential for rejection? Is there potential for what would fall apart? What's the belief around that? Where did that come from? And in that case, it's a lot of media culture. It's a lot of pseudo, sort of construction around completely false narratives that have been perpetuated by the porn industry. Not that I have anything against erotica, because I think that's great, but porn is just another sort of system of domination in many ways. Certainly not really about consent. We've seen Me Too and Time's Up and a variety of other ways that people get their boundaries invaded on, whether it's a woman and it's in a sexual context, or whether it's a man and he can't ask for a raise, or whether it's a little kid that wanted to have his friend over, but their parents said no because, they were afraid about their dirty house or something. You'd be surprised at the way things can kind of, like a pearl and an oyster, they grow from a grain of sand, but unlike a pearl, they don't have the kind of street market value, but they are just as valuable. So what's your pearl? What's your core gift? Usually it's your trauma. Usually your greatest gift to the world, as my mom would say, your Achilles heel is your vein of gold. Mm-hmm. So what is that? And the more that we kind of start to unpack that, the better off we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really love how you probe reality in ways that get us to the beliefs that we have and why we've arrived at those beliefs. Mm-hmm. So what have been the influences culturally, transgenerationally, mimetically on us that have caused us to feel certain ways, and then talking those things through, maybe approaching our fears, because we know that on the other side are these treasures that we really want to get to, that help us live with that radical authenticity that all of us strive for maximal character development in this story. And I'm so happy that you focus your life's work on this. And these are these ways of creating these positive wakes through you, and then through other people to their butterfly effects.
Exactly. That's the hope. The hope is that, everything, I'm sort of a conduit, right? Like, I've sort of learned certain things and, done my own work in healing, and I'm still in process, and as we all are. But taking this, and then, like, when I see clients like shift, oh my God. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's amazing to see their lives open up, and then how then they can show up and they can change and be different. Because again, everyone has their gifts and works differently. Some people, like, talking about my mom again, but she's an emergency room physician. She runs a project in Africa. She helps people with a variety of things, like increasing births for rural women, and education on women and girls, and that's the way she is doing things. You know what I mean? That's her gift. My gift is this way. It's a little bit more one-on-one in this way of, well, what would it be like to hold space right here, right now? What would it be like to just sort of say, like, we didn't have that then, but how do you feel right here, right now with me? How is that? And a lot of it is about being regulated yourself. And we don't live in a culture that values regulation. We know it when we see it, though. And we know it when we don't see it. And I can see even now you're settling more, even as we wind down.
We, to understand the regulatory neurotransmission that occurs is very interesting. This sort of things like norepinephrine or serotonin and dopamine, and the way that the regulatory systems actually work through the lower part of our brain up into the cortex, and how these communicate with the rest of our body and our environment is a very important pillar to, I think, teach in schools, and we don't quite get there. Okay, there's so many other ways to take what we're talking about. Okay, let's talk on. There's probably now more than ever with the exponential technology era, and you mentioned earlier, you're in control or you're being controlled in many ways by the device, by the attention economy, by the corporations that are aiming to profiteer off of off of you. So, what are these ways for us to work on? We talked about them a little bit. This gratitude, this slowing down, this empathy with other humans. What are these sort of principles now that are more important than ever for us to teach our children and for us as adults to embody?
I think that's really kind of a great question, because I think that a lot of times people feel like the minute that they exhale, like things will be out of control, right? We were talking about, the word binary earlier. We think it's all black or all white. Where's the gray? It's all this or all that. What if we held both? What if we could create enough space that there could be, excuse me, in existence, our own exploration into our own beingness? What if we could drop down into that? Even for 5 minutes a day, 1 minute a day, 3 minutes a day, and just notice what comes up. One of the biggest things about mindfulness is that as a practice, it really is just about being able to, if you use John Kabat-Zinn's definition, which is fine, you just say, it's being able to kind of look at things, whatever they are, with a kind, friendly attention and curiosity, without, sort of grabbing, pushing away, or zoning out about it. Okay, fine. You start to sit down and you do that. A lot of people will meditate, they want to do their thing, whatever they want to do, however they're imagining it. I'm not supposed to have any thoughts. I'm just supposed to follow my breath. In, out, belly breathing. I have a thought about lunch. Shoot, I'm a bad meditator. Bleh. And then they go into this, thing. What if we were just noticing, I'm here now. There was a thought that happened to be about whatever the content was.
Lunch.
Right?
Yeah.
What if we didn't get lost in the content, but we were curious about the process, and we were able to return our attention?
That's it, yeah.
So when you make the shift from content to process, whether it's phone, whether it's parenting, whether it's work or life trajectory, career, whatever, there's so many things that are focused on, as I was saying, scalability, maximum things. What are the goals? What are the outcomes? What are the, I don't want to say who cares, but really who cares? Because the truth is, when you're, as you would say in the mindfulness world, when you're on the path, you will get there. You set the compass of your heart toward a certain direction. Now, you don't know what kind of weather there's going to be, but you know where you've set the compass of your heart. And then you commit to constancy around your practice. And that practice is the process of life. It's nothing fancy. It's learning to relate to things differently. It's learning to open yourself to possibility which might mean being happy, but not always necessarily being right, right? Like someone else might still have this other idea. So in terms of the next generation, is one able to do this for oneself, or does one, in the 5 minutes that one sits down and tries to do whatever, right, and the thought goes to lunch, what are we believing about that? What's the story I'm telling myself? So there's the me, there's the whole me that's sitting here, noble and dignified, spiritual royalty. There's the activity of the mind, which secretes thoughts in much the same way that our mouth secretes saliva. It naturally does what it does, which is have a thought. Can we bring our attention back? That you can do a gazillion times about anything. Can you do it with road rage when you're in the traffic on the LA freeway? Can you do it when your kid is screaming? Can you pause? Not stop, but can we go from binary of screaming kid, I get mad, bad parent, quiet kid, you know, giving them their bottle, good parent, right? Like what about all the stuff that's in between? Back to the attachment stuff, it's rupture and repair. We are about chaos and synergy. It's not just, you know, crazy all the time, because we know that nothing's permanent, we know that nothing's personal, and we know that nothing's perfect. But what it is it's always moving. There's always this, to use Eugene Gendlin's language, there's always this implicit felt sense it's moving forward. Life is always moving forward, in really more a spiral than like a circle that's just back and forth. You know, you feel like you're a gerbil on a treadmill. No, it's a spiral, it's moving out, right? So how do we tap into that when we're shutting ourselves down? I can't think this way, I have to think this way, I'm labeling it this thing even before I've experienced it because someone else told me that that's what it is. How do you know? When's the last time you questioned something? When's the last time you questioned your own way of thinking? When's the last time you noticed process and not content? How am I thinking about this? How did I come to believe this? How did I come to walk this way, to be this way, to relate this way? And then I think the more one can do that, the more one can show up with kids. I mean, yes, you can do little belly breathing. There are all kinds of great exercises. Greater Good Science Center, UC Berkeley has a bunch of them. Richie Davison's work is amazing. You can do little belly breathing with the little teddy bears on the tummies of the little kids, where they can just watch their belly rise and fall. You know, you can literally have phone time, you know, be turned off. I know Tristan Harris and a bunch of other folks are doing amazing stuff in terms of trying to like data privacy, keep your phones off, you know, all that kind of stuff. That's fine. I mean, you can turn your Wi-Fi off for 5 hours a day if you don't want to.
You hit this super well with these two words, with content versus process. That's so interesting. So rather than necessarily just looking at the thought and saying, oh, lunch came up, rather think about why did lunch come up? What are all of the previous behaviors of mine that have led for me to be in that moment, and to find that nuance, to find the gray area between the binaries that one can explore. I love thinking about it in terms of process, in terms of all the variables that come crunching in for that to have happen.
And needs, meaning like if the thought's coming up about lunch, even though I'm trying to do self-care or self-inquiry, what's the need there?
Yeah.
Meaning, what is it that is needing to be taken away? If you use internal family systems language, Dick Schwartz's work, that's a protector piece, right? So that's like, ooh, I better come in here and make sure that they don't get too close to understanding who they really are, because they still need to be sheeple and just show up in a certain way because that's all they know. And that's going to keep them safe. So, oh, this thought's coming up right now. Can I just notice the thought? Thank you. Have gratitude for it. You're the protector that was trying to keep me, quote unquote, on track, that when I was 5, you know, I learned, or whatever it is, you know, get to that later. And can right now I just come back to the breath? And what is it like to just be here in the body and notice the thought and have the awareness of the thought? And maybe at some point get curious about how did that thought come to be? Or what is it trying to protect?
We're dosing up towards mindfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same with the addictive behaviors. What's the impulse to have the drink? What's the impulse to go have sex? What's the impulse to go buy? Not that any of those are bad in moderation.
Yeah, but why are these impulses arriving? What is the actual process that has occurred to get to that piece of content that has happened? Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about things.
But most people can't sit with themselves if they're not doing some of those things because they believe that there's something wrong with them. And it was Annie Lott who said, my mind's like a bad neighborhood. I don't want to go there alone. And if you look at the old Star Wars movies, Ron will remember this, I don't know if you will, but there was a place where there was like a junk field where they was all crashing in and, you know, like I don't know if you saw the original ones.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like our mind. It's just like filled with all this crap and there's this little creature that pokes its little eyeball out and, you know, wants to like drag you under and, you know, Luke Skywalker's like drowning, of course, the force of light. That's you. No. You don't have to do that. Open to possibility.
The sunlight is you. The sunlight.
But you're not
a
just
junkyard.
Yeah, well, exactly. But what I'm getting at is there's a lot of stuff up in there. So bow to it. Be grateful.
Be grateful.
Ask what it has to teach us.
Yeah.
Don't say, oh, it shouldn't be here. It's a junkyard. Just say, there's a lot of interesting stuff there.
Yeah. And to understand it, to aim to understand the processes better. You also said the compass of the heart was super powerful as well, that we're on this path of, I know what is going to bring me the most meaning, character leveling up in my life, and so I've set my heart on that path, and there's going to be bad weather and all this stuff that comes, but the perseverance, the good mentorship, the good social fabric that exists around us to help us get there and help each other get there. So important. Very quick couple questions. Very quick. Let's power around through a couple of these. What would you say is a core driving principle of your life?
Truth.
Whose truth? Mine or yours?
You're assuming it's a noun.
Teach us more.
So when I say truth, I mean like the way. What is true, right? So it's not the known, it's the knowing. It's the knowing quality. Can we tap into what is it that is the one who is aware, the quality of knowingness, the idea of things being like the Tao, like the way. What is the way? Can we be curious about what the way might be and then fall into it, right? That's flow. That's truth, because that's the way. That's how it goes. We're not imposing ourselves into something. We're dropping into what's already here. A lot easier than friction and fighting and trying to, because we are all, you know, unique and snowflakes, and I don't mean from the negative millennial, right, nomenclature. I mean, we are. There's no other me or other you. Geneticists aside, playing in China, doing whatever they're doing, right? There isn't. So why are we here? I mean, really, what's the truth of that? And can we be curious about it and have constancy and set the compass toward being on the path of wanting to know more?
What do you think is the truth of why we're here?
Well, I mean, I think it's for everyone to find out. I don't think there's an answer about one way. I think it is a mystery. And I think that's the beauty of it.
Are we remembering then?
Are we remembering how we've been? I'm not sure about the question.
Are we remembering then what our purpose is to be playing here?
I mean, I think that implicit in this, there's an assumption that like there's something to know.
And there may not be.
Yeah. What if there was just something to be?
Just something to be. Okay. To even ask this follow-up question, it would be, how would you redesign civilization?
Boy, oh boy. I guess I would just inject it with more love if possible, right?
Just inject it with more love.
Well, you used the word injection before, so I think it's like, top of mind.
Dose it with more love.
Well, I mean, real love, unconditional love, has fierce love and fierce compassion, not just what they would call in some Tibetan Buddhist circles idiot compassion, which is, the enabler, right? You're giving too much to too many. It means boundaries. Real love is boundaries. Real love is boundaries, but it's always coming from a place of connection with oneself and with the earth and with one another. And so when you have that, there's less of a unmet need that then creates fear, that then kind of perpetuates that cycle of greed, of insatiability, and never having enough and never being enough and always having it more and more and more. And then that sets up that other cycle of dominance as opposed to of connection. I mean, research has shown from babies again and again and again, we share. We like to play in the sandbox with one another. Kids don't see color. We know race is a construct. Who did it benefit? Certain ruling classes, So just checking all of that, that's where knowledge or education in terms of history and stuff comes into play. Yes, learn the history. Take classes from whiteawake.org. Take classes from Layla Assad, whitesupremacyandme.com. Take classes from pattydye.com/racism to learn what it means.
Just go Google search what the scramble for Africa was. You can go and look at things via Wikipedia through a lens.
That's true, and we can also look at the ways in which, especially in this country and in other countries that have had similar histories, the way in which there was a real benefit, an unearned privilege benefit of certain folks who grew up with perhaps not, riches per se, right? But with a certain white skin privilege, for example, in this country, which is something that most people say, well, I didn't ask to be born in this body, or I didn't do anything wrong, and that's all true. It's not true. That is true. And because of other things like Jim Crow laws and redlining and the way of, incarceration, there are other folks who have brown skin who will never be able to, the way things are currently constructed, be seen in the same way and have the same opportunities. I mean, when Oprah Winfrey gets stopped in Hermes, and she's a billionaire, because people there can't believe that she could afford a pocketbook that costs a couple $100,000, it's kind of remarkable.
The tides are changing, and the morality is growing. The moral arc is going towards justice, as MLK said. All right, last two. Wouldn't be simulation if we didn't ask you. Are we in a simulation?
A lot of people say that, right? They say that our real state is our sleep state. That this thing, sort of walking around, doesn't matter. That's really my response. How aware are you of where you are right now? Is it dog wagging tail or tail wagging dog? That's your simulation.
And the last question is, what do you think is the most beautiful thing in the world?
I don't know. The one for me that's been so poignant, is healing. so poignant to see that moment of, and to be privileged to experience it, witness, and in some way be a part of that return to wholeness. I really think that there's something there that's just, and it comes in many ways. It can come through poetry, it can come through maybe a session, it can come through looking at the ocean or the Grand Canyon, or it can come through making love, it can come through a variety of ways, but I think healing is probably the most beautiful thing. And my cats. No, I'm just kidding.
I do think that was the first time we had healing as they answered a beautiful thing in the world. Francesca, what a profoundly fascinating and enlightening episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming
Such
onto
a
the show.
pleasure. Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're a rock star.
What a great time.
It's filled with so much wisdom. So grateful for you, for Ron, for your work. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. We would love to hear from you in the comments below. Let us know some of your thoughts on the episode. Also, do empower other leaders like Francesca, like Simulation, support artists, support entrepreneurs, support people that are doing processes of healing, support each other in our communities, give each other that empathy, that deep love and unity. And just understand the development of humans into the world. So much. Check out the links below to Francesca's work.
Thank you.
Thank you. And everyone, go and build the future. Go and manifest your destiny into the world. Align that heart compass on that path and go and build. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Francesca. Thanks, everyone. We love you. Peace.
Peace.